Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the extraordinary meeting of the Horowhenua District Council for the Wednesday, the 17th of March. Can I please first call for apologies?
We have an apology for Councillor Tukapua.
I'll move that apology be accepted. Seconded, Councillor Brannigan. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Any late item?
No late items.
Declarations of interest from any councillors?
Yeah, just a conflict of interest in the DC discussion. I'd like to withdraw from that. Thank you.
5.1. Councillor Bishop.
Likewise, 5.1.
5.1. Thank you. Announcements. There is one.
So just to note, the Independent Auditor's report has been circulated prior to today's meeting. It is on your table, and that should be noted as being received by the Council today.
Thank you. So moving to first item on the agenda, which is the adoption for consultation of the draft development contributions policy. Can I move receipt of that report? Seconded, Deputy Mayor Mason. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. So we have in front of us 3.3, that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the draft development contributions policy 2021 for public consultation to occur simultaneously with the long-term plan 2021-41 consultation document. Do I have a mover and seconder for that motion?
I just had some questions, please.
Some questions beforehand?
Yep.
So,
just a question regarding, I've obviously read the report and I sent in some questions around a number of aspects, and the one that sticks out for me is whether we have done any analysis on the impact of introducing a development contributions policy on our 95th percentile forecasting assumption. And just to clarify, the scope of my question is, I think there is an argument that introduction of a development contribution policy could have a chilling effect on development, some development, and I just wanted to understand very clearly what analysis has been done, if any, around that.
Through yourself, Chair. So thank you, Councillor Jennings, and this was a question that has previously been requested from Councillor Jennings. So I can confirm that in preparing the draft DC policy and model, this was prepared on the basis of the 95th percentile in terms of the information that is presented to Council. The second part of the question, however, in terms of has there been analysis around whether there could be a chilling reflection of that is not being built into what you're presented with today.
Councillor Jennings, which is about the second question. Sorry, I should have outlined that I had two questions. So the second question is just in relation again to the questions that I'd put forward earlier, which was just around compatibility of the proposed development contributions policy with some of our existing strategies and plans. So, and we've adopted the community wellbeing strategy just last week, which talks about housing affordability, and then we've obviously got the housing action plan, which also talks about affordability. And I just wanted to understand again the analysis that's been done around compatibility of this proposed policy with those documents.
Through you again, Mayor Wandin. So just to confirm, the process that was carried out in terms of the background to a point that you're presented with what you have in front of you today for consideration, there have been a number of internal workshops with officers where all current strategies and policies of council have been considered as part of those workshops to understand I guess the correlation to what you are considering in terms of reintroducing or proposing to reintroduce development contributions. Those strategies and policies, as you will know, are far-reaching. They do include the likes of the Housing Action Plan that have been mentioned. It also includes over all of our other strategies in terms of infrastructure strategies, asset management plans, and officers have covered in that process testing, I guess, the risks, the impacts on affordability as best as we know based on those current strategies. However, when you touch on affordability, I would like to point out that Council is also currently discussing a specific targeted piece of work around affordability in the Horowhenua and what affordability actually means. That piece of work has not been completed. However, I would be comfortable in saying that all of the current strategies and policies have been tested for risks in relationship to this policy that you're considering today.
Any other points of clarification or questions at this stage? Thank you. So, do I have a mover and a seconder of the motion then? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Keru.
Sorry, just a point of clarification around the decision making with iwi. There was just one word, I just needed some clarification around the word stakeholder. Even in the document it talks about us, iwi being partners, and it uses the word stakeholder. Can someone clarify that bit for me and the difference between them?
So just for clarification, Councillor Ketu, is that in relation to the development contributions policy or the LTP document? I suspect it's probably with the LTP. So with the leave of Councillor Ketu, can we just hold that question when we get to the LTP document itself? Okay.
Thank you. So moving on, Deputy Mayor Mason happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mitchell, thank you. Any debate, discussion? Councillor Jennings.
I think people will be unsurprised that I'm going to be speaking against this motion and adoption of this policy. And that's not because I'm against development contributions, but because of what I believe is a flawed process leading up to today's motion. I agree that people who cause or acquire growth infrastructure should pay for it. Growth delivers opportunities to existing residents too, and so those who also benefit from upgrades and increased levels of service should also contribute. But it's at what level and in respect of what activities are the key policy questions. Growth funding tools are absolutely required. Development contributions are but one option that could be used, and I do support the use of development contributions within a hierarchy of other growth funding tools and options. And development contributions will be the ideal choice of tool in many circumstances, but not all. My concern is that development contributions are being prioritised as the key funding tool because they are quicker and easier than other growth funding tools. However, to me, they appear to be more blunt, with higher likelihood of constraining growth, and there's also a potential to decrease land values across Horowhenua, and at the same time, where development occurs, it will likely drive up section, house and rental prices because developers will simply pass these costs on to their customers. In the short term, I think that this policy will make housing affordability worse by destroying any marginal viability for entry-level or affordable housing. Rather than a lump sum or DC type approach, my preferred approach is to spread the cost of that growth infrastructure over a longer period and collect it via targeted rates, for example. But we can't do this because our LTP draft takes us through our current debt ceiling, and our proposed capital program takes us up very close to our new proposed 250% ceiling. We have limited debt capacity. We should also be giving priority to special purpose vehicles and private developer treaties, but we are not. What I'm ultimately saying is that different tools work well in different situations, and we should be exploring them and consulting on them through this LTP. That is exactly what elected members asked for on 3 June at our council meeting. Unfortunately, the process that has followed has not been ideal or robust. That is my primary concern. Governance has not set the strategy, the vision, or the parameters we want to see. Instead, we have tinkered with a predetermined, one-size-fits-all policy. This policy process, in my view, has not been robust and would not withstand external scrutiny. I want to remind elected members that in January of this year, we were presented with a plan that involved a 13% increase in total rates and a $55 million program of works. So to afford that program, at that point, development contributions were inevitable. We were basically in a corner. We had to do it. And then in February, 2 days out from a public workshop, a draft policy arrived in our email inbox for us to review. And at this point, elected members have not had the strategic input into the direction of the policy or broader growth funding options. I accept that this policy is partly needed right now because that is effectively what we've legally signed up to with the Tata Ika development. And that's obviously a clearly defined catchment with clear growth-related costs. But beyond that, my concern is that Council really has never had a conversation about our overarching objectives or policy goals for growth funding. We've never had a conversation that says, how do we fund this growth, but also make sure we ensure affordable housing? How do we fund growth, but also encourage higher density infill or rural lifestyle development that carries no infrastructure or limited infrastructure costs, but obviously adds to the pool of available ratepayers? We've never agreed or discussed whether our approach is purely about cost recovery, or whether we're trying to set broader policy parameters or achieve broader goals. There were key philosophical discussions needed, and we haven't had them. We've simply gone for the quickest and apparently easiest tool. And I say apparently easiest because, in my opinion, you need some form of qualification and a whole bunch of staying power in order to read and comprehend these policy documents. And so I say good luck to mum and dad subdividers who want to cut off the back 300 metres of their property. Our input as governors has been to tweak and word massage rather than drive broader policy settings. As I say, I'm not against growth funding or DCs in principle, but I'm against this policy version. The policy process to arrive at it is simply not sound. And apart from the one public workshop we had, the discussion of this policy has been behind closed doors and hasn't been transparent. And of most concern to me is that we haven't yet developed a credible, sustainable, long-term financial strategy under which this policy sits. And so I ask elected members around this table, do you genuinely understand where the 240 plus million worth of non-Tata Ika growth projects that are proposed through the LTP, what they are for, where they sit? Because they are underpinning the DC costs for each catchment. And we've had no business case, no feasibility studies, and very little detail around what these growth projects entail. We don't have information about the scope, risk, dependencies, potential impacts, trade-offs, and the opportunity cost if we do these projects over others. We've not discussed any of that. And we have no idea about the potential chilling effect and downstream impacts of this policy on our population assumptions. We have no analysis of how this policy, in my opinion, is compatible with strategies and plans that this council has adopted, like the Housing Action Plan and Community Wellbeing Strategy. Throughout the workshop process, elected members have given direction to staff on the policy, but I don't think we really have understood the implications of those decisions. And in my opinion, it is irresponsible for us to give that policy direction without robust information and analysis. So ultimately, this policy exercise does not meet my expectations, and I don't think I can support it. There are other reasons that I think that this process has been compromised, but notwithstanding how much I would like to present a unified front around this table and be constructive, but for all of these reasons that I've outlined, I can't put my name to this policy to adopt it, even for consultation at this stage. I'll be spending the next 4 weeks working out how this policy process could be rescued and develop a case for some significant changes to the policy parameters, including pushing for us to be clear about what other funding mechanisms we have available and should be prioritising. Finally, I apologise to the public for taking this position, but I can't back the product of a policy process I believe is flawed.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Mason.
Thank you, Your Worship. I acknowledge Councillor Jennings' words, but want to be quite clear that this is a document that's going out for consultation only. It's been well prepared, and we have had a significant amount of opportunities to input, have conversations, and publicly attended workshops in relation to it. We've been going to do this for some time, and we were going to take this piece of work out to our community after the long-term plan, but the advice to us was the contrary, and so we've brought it forward to be coinciding with the long-term plan. The policy that we have proposed for consultation only at this point is one of a minimal suite of tools that we have available to us for funding growth. If we were to adopt this plan, we as elected members do need to take ownership of it and carefully monitor it alongside of our growth assumptions. The time is now to hear from our district, who have been asking us in various iterations about this policy, and to give them the opportunity to take a look at it and give us their feedback. So I hold an alternate view. I am concerned about the potential chilling effect of rates and debt if we don't explore other options for funding growth, and this is one of them. So I support the adoption of this consultation document today.
Councillor Allen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to acknowledge Councillor Jennings' contribution and the challenges that he's put forward. They're genuinely held, they're well signalled, and I want to thank him for the inclusive way that he's shared his concerns with us, not just today, but in the time leading up to today. So, I speak in favour of the resolution. I acknowledge that there inevitably are concerns about those big documents that Council has, its various strategies and policies, and about how there's always a concern about whether they form an integrated whole. Are they compatible? Do they all mesh together? Do they all talk to each other? My concern is that they never will completely, not for want of will on our part that they do so, but because those documents are based on assumptions. Whether it's the 95th percentile or whatever, there are assumptions which drive those documents and can lead to different assumptions, therefore different outcomes. So full compatibility is an aspiration and a dream, but in my view, not really a reality. In terms of the phrase, the chilling effects of the DC's development contribution and those other underpinning alternatives which sit in this model that we've put out for consultation, I see not so much a chilling effect as a what will happen if we don't do this. This, for me, is framed by some growth assumptions which suggest a district that will double in population over the life of this district plan. It speaks to me of a need for council to identify who pays for that growth and how that growth is paid for. One of the facts that echoes in my mind every time we have this discussion is where we sit in the deprivation index across New Zealand. if there is not a system by which growth is paid for by the people who are creating that growth, where does the buck fall? It falls on the ratepayers, and it falls on the ratepayers of one of the poorest districts in New Zealand. We had public workshops in order to identify the proposal that we put out to the public, as Councillor Mason has said. It was good that those workshops were public, because it meant from the very beginning those people who are following this discussion could not only see the recommendation that fell out of that workshop, but the logic that went into framing that proposition. And most importantly, they had the opportunity to see councillors disagreeing, councillors having that discussion, having that argument and disagreeing. But what we've ended up with is a proposal which recognises that development contribution provide the most certainty when it comes to gaining the costs associated, to recovering the costs associated with it. DCs provide the most certainty in that. It doesn't make them the best vehicle, but it makes it the most certain vehicle about recovering costs. Absolutely, in this document there sit other scenarios, such as the special purpose vehicle or the development agreements or whatever. But we know from the expert advice we've been given that those are often difficult to use. SPVs, for example, depend on the magnitude of the development. Development agreements can be difficult in terms of making sure that the private sector does enable those things to happen. So as a result of that, Mr. Mayor, I do support the resolution. I do reflect on the point that Councillor Mason has made, which is at this stage, I absolutely go into this with no predetermination. This to me looks like the fairest and most practical alternative at this stage. It may or may not be significant that there's no one sitting in the gallery. I fully expected people to be turning up and submitting. Oh, there is one. Oh, yes, thank you. Great. Good on you. We have the public present today to be party to this. So, I mean, I don't know what that means, but normally when we get things wrong, the gallery tells us we get things wrong. So I conclude by saying I support the proposal, recognising it's a proposal, and I look forward to the feedback.
Councillor Brannigan.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'll keep this brief because the both sides of the coin have been well debated or argued or spoken about by the previous speakers, councillors. But I just want to recap on a couple of things. In 2014, I think it was, my first term, we looked at development contributions, and we got rid of the policy we had at the time because we needed to stimulate growth, and there was none. And it was the reason for it was primarily to stimulate growth, and partly, no doubt, it achieved that. But we're in very different times, and it's and we're seeing now unprecedented growth, that's bringing all kinds of challenges to our community and certainly to this council. I bear in mind that this is a draft consultation document that outlines an opportunity or a choice. The biggest concern for me is, in terms of our growth, is that we cannot continue to burden the existing ratepayer with the cost of that growth, and we have to look at all opportunities to mitigate that and fund that growth outside of the existing ratepayer and pure rate. And for that reason, supporting Councillor Allen's commentary around, at this stage, without predetermination, at this stage, development contributions look a reasonable option to do that. I've been spoken to by a number of developers, and some of those developers have actually said that we need to introduce development contributions to me for a number of reasons. One of those is to provide surety in the cost of development. Is it the panacea? No, we know it's not. Is there other options? Yes. Should there be other options? Yes. And we have encouraged the council and council officers, the chief executive, to explore all options when it comes to funding growth. And that I guess that work will carry on. It is a consultation document, and I would expect that we get we hope and we expect the development community come forward and give us their thoughts and give us their ideas and give us their contribution that will end up in whatever we choose at the end of the day. And I would also hope and request that the community come forward, because it will affect them in terms of development contributions, either side of it, whether to introduce them or whether not to. And I'm looking forward to achieving that through the LTP consultation process, and look forward to an outcome that is good for our community. So I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Kay Simmons.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I'm mindful of DCs having a possible negative effect on our low-income families in housing, including home ownership. So the community feedback is extremely important regarding this draft consultation document, as has been expressed by everybody else at the table. So I do support this going out to our people to decide what they want regarding DCs. So I fully support the intent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Keru.
Tēnā koutou. Kei te whakaaeau e pāne ki te kaupapa nei hei mua i a tātou. Engari, ngā kōrero, te kaupapa o tō tātou whānau o te rohe nei. Tēnā mau taumahata te kaupapa hei mua i a tātou. Ka tipu ake tātou is a word that we use about those who have grown from the land and have grown up in this land, whereby the nutrients and the soil and the elements add to our growth in life. And those types of concepts was a challenge for us when we came into this space as being elected as councillors. And I am supporting that this document would go out for consultation ki tō tātou whānau to our families, so that we can get some feedback about what they think about this document. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Rob. Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Lucky last. So I too support this going out for consultation. I'm interested in feedback from the community. In particular, look, there are some aspects that we are asking for feedback on. I guess one is past spending. We're proposing to not include any past spending in the calculation of the development contributions, and I'm wondering if we've got that right. Should we be including some of the infrastructure that we've been putting in to facilitate growth in the last year or so? I'm particularly thinking about the northeast corner of Levin. So the other one is the catchments, whether we take development contributions for the individual catchments that are serviced for water and wastewater, or whether we actually do it on a district-wide basis because we have a harmonised water, wastewater, stormwater system, whether we've got that right. If we do it on a catchment basis, is that going to possibly determine where the growth occurs, because it may be cheaper in some places than others, and that may drive the growth in some places unintentionally more than in others. So, and the other is the contributions, the amount of contribution, I guess. Somewhere I read that development contributions are assumed to provide 95 million towards growth costs in the 20 years. Is that enough? Because I know that the growth costs are going to be a lot more than 95 million if you go through and add up just the water and wastewater alone. So we do need the public and developers to look closely at the detail on this, I think, and give us their feedback. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate the contribution that has been made around the table to this discussion, and I think sends a clear signal to our community that there is democracy is in good hands, that we are discussing this to the extent that we are. And I do appreciate all views and opinions in terms of some of the challenges that we do face before any growth policy is adopted by this council over the next few months. And the challenge that Councillor Jennings has set us that to make sure that we fully understand what we are talking about and discussing. But I'm also conscious of the challenge that Councillor Brannigan and others have set to the community and the developers, that we do want their feedback, that we do want to make sure that we hear them. And obviously there is much to discuss and consider. However, I am gratified that we have signalled to this community that this term we would reconsider some sort of growth development policy, and I'm pleased to see that it is being on the table. So with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Do you want that recorded? Councillor Jennings is against. The motion is carried. Thank you. So we now move to page 15 of our agenda, which is the adoption of supporting information to the long-term plan 2021 to 41 consultation document. And could I, while officers are coming up, can I move receipt of these reports supporting documentation? Moved Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Isaacs. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you, Esther.
Kia ora, Mayor and Councillors. Before we get started, I will take the report as read, but I do just want to table an amendment that has been made to the consultation document following requests from audit. So if you just note on page 6, we've updated our events and our consultation dates. On page 23, there has been some various minor wording additions. Page 24, there's also been some minor wording additions, so nothing has been removed, just some minor additions have been added. And then also page 54, the audit report is now included. No changes to any of the supporting documents or information.
Anyone else? Right. Are there any questions or clarifications of officers? Councillor Jennings.
Sorry, this is just a last minute question. On the we're talking about all the documents, aren't we? Not just the consultation documents? Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so excellent. I'm in the right place. Under the activity statements, I think is the right document. Sorry, should have been better organised. Page 122. Why can't I find my... Sorry, it seems to have disappeared off the hub. That one. No? My apologies. Should be, I haven't got it in front of me, but it's page 122 of the activity statements, I think it is, refers to the Waititi Beach Surf Life Saving Club. Is it? Have I got that right? Yep. So it looks to me that the top line under general property renewals and the bottom line from year 5 onwards, there might be an error in there. Can you just confirm that? Okay. Sorry, it was the last minute. Just. So yes, so it's so just to clarify, it's page 122 of the document, but I think it's coming up as page 118 when you look it up electronically. So on the first line, it's got community buildings program renewals, and then on the bottom line, Waitadere Beach Surf Club saving design and build, and it looks like from year 5 the numbers are just identical onwards right through to year 20. I think that might just be.
Just confirm that is correct. So the line Waitadere Beach Surf Lifesaving Club should only have a figure of 3,158. So that line is incorrect.
And sorry, just one last question was on page 124, which is page 120 on the electronic version. There's obviously reference to Gladstone Road subdivision, Endowment subdivision, and Post Road quarry. Presumably, there's a corresponding income line once those properties are developed, and I just was being a bit dense and I couldn't find it in the document. Are you able to point me to it?
So on page 128 of that same document, there is reference there to proceeds from sale of assets. So that would be part of that. It is noted that there will need to be an assessment on the likely yield from those investments that we make, in particular, using it as an example, Gladstone Road, and that's work that we need to do between probably now and the time that we adopt the LTP, the final LTP. Just noting on that Waitadere Beach Surf Life Saving Club, so the table that I've got is actually spread out over a 10-year period, and my understanding, just for clarification, Ashley, that it only goes up to year 6 or 5. Because I think we need to note that as an amendment to the document before it's actually circulated.
So there is just a lump sum in year 3, 3.158 mil.
Okay. That may not be what the council is seeing in their table, but we'll clarify that afterwards. Okay.
Any other questions, points of clarification? Councillor Keddy.
Yes, just coming back to my previous question about the difference between partner and stakeholder, and can someone clarify that for me, please? In the document of, I think it's page 7, is it? Yeah, page 5.5, page 7, paragraph 4.
So we did try to have a look for that, Councillor Keto, during the conversation, and Ashley will just continue to see if she can find the page that you're referring to. I was wondering whether it may have been the section within the document which refers to Foxton Pool, where we directly do discuss stakeholders, and it's in the context of aquatic stakeholders in the wider community. And in Ashley's first search, she couldn't find actually where you were referring to, but just to clarify, any reference to stakeholder in the context of, say, using the example of Foxton Pool, that would be direct users of that aquatic facilities. That would be the likes of the classes, the schools. They are an aquatic stakeholder. However, we also directly engage with our partners, being iwi, on that topic with regards to the pool. They are distinctly different conversations, And we would, in terms of our partnership under our community outcome umbrella, there are obviously means in which we engage with our partners right from the beginning of a process, whereas with an aquatic stakeholder, for example, they would come in at a point where we're directly talking to them about the impact on them in terms of a user of the aquatic facility versus a partnership that we have under our council umbrella of partnership. So unless Ashley has found the page you're referring to, I am sorry we're not quite clear on where that has come up, although there is the stakeholder reference in the consultation document with regards to Fox and Pool.
Okay. Mayor Bernier, am I allowed to ask Terry just to read the part that I'm referring to?
Yes.
If you can just read that when it talks about all the stakeholders and the names of those different iwi that are and it's listed there.
Do you know what page it is on your document there?
It's the significance and engagement policy.
Yes.
And you're looking at, what's it, 5.5?
So I'm just reading the fourth one, right?
Yeah.
Council does not have memorandum of partnership with Ngāti Apa or Ngāti Raukawa ki te tonga. Brackets, the overarching mandated iwi body, or with Ngāti Huia e Ngāti Whakatere, Ngāti Raukawa. However, Council recognises that they are key stakeholders in the district and are often involved in both formal and informal consultation.
I try to get some clarification of, because in our document it says that we're stakeholders, but we're partners at the same time. So as treaty partners, we are, but we're also stakeholders. That's what I was trying to get some clarification around that. Does it need to be changed, or
So with the agreement of the table, I'd like to be able to speak to Councillor Keto offline to actually determine whether we should amend. And I think it sounds like it's in the significance and engagement policy. It's not in the CD document itself. So on that basis, the wording is important and subject to confirmation from Councillor Ketu as to the appropriate wording. And if we can do that offline, we can make that tweak before as the document's adopted, but that would be subject to Council's approval that we accept that document, subject to that alteration that may need to be made. But I think it would be better if I talk to Councillor Ketu separately.
Councillor Ketu, you comfortable with that approach? Thank you. Everyone else okay with that? Fine, thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Again, in the activity statements, and I have asked this question to officers, but I still struggle to understand the rationale behind it. On page 142, under community infrastructure projects to improve the level of service, under Podes Road Lake Reserve, we have over the first 7 years about 17 million put aside for Podes Road Lake Reserve, which is tied up with the water supply infrastructure. And I still struggle to understand why we have such a large amount of money in community infrastructure for something which really primarily is for water supply. Yes, there may be later on maybe some sort of reserve up there close to it, but I wouldn't imagine the public would have access to a public water supply. And I struggle to understand why it's in that budget line rather than over in a water supply budget line. It's also in the water supply budget line. It's in 3 different places. It's in Podes Road Quarry. It's in the alternative water supply and water supply. So it's property the first one, water supply the next one, and community infrastructure the next one. When you add them all together, it comes to something like 50 million. Now, I'm sure that the Podes Road Quarry will be self-funding. I would hope it would be self-funding. I would hope that the holes in the ground that get dug will be paid for by the royalties or whatever, whoever takes the metal out. That remains to be seen. That all has to be sorted out, business cases and all that sort of stuff. It's just why in this budget line under community infrastructure when it's primarily a water supply cost.
In terms of this one, I think in terms of conversations we've had, there'll be a portion of the expenditure which will sit in the reserve or in the community infrastructure area if it relates to things like reserves and walking paths and things like that. But definitely during the consultation period, the 3 lines that you mentioned do need review before the final to make sure that we've got firstly what you mentioned in terms of the revenue rate, in terms of what aggregate we're expecting to come out of the quarry, and then get the spending right in terms of the proportions that will relate to the community facilities part of it, the water part of it, and then any particular quarry part of it. So you're right in the sense that this is a bit of at the moment there's placeholders in each area, but it would look to change for the final, I think, in terms of once more discussion is had around it.
Thank you. So we're not expecting to see it the same as us at the end of June. Right, that's my main concern. Thank you.
Okay, so moving to the recommendations then, and I propose to do these individually, or maybe the first 2 we can do together, but after that individually. So we have 3.3, that the supporting documents including the financial strategy, infrastructure strategy, activity statements, financial statements, significant forecasting assumptions, statement on council-controlled organisations, statement on the development of Maori capacity to contribute to decision-making, significance and engagement policy, rates remission policy, and revenue and financing policy be adopted and made available to the public as supporting information for Council's long-term plan 2021 to 41 consultation document. And 3.4, that if necessary, the Group Manager, Customer and Strategy, in consultation with the Chief Executive, be authorised to correct any minor errors or omissions in any of the supporting documents before they are publicly notified. Do I have a mover and seconder for those 2 resolutions? Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Allen, any discussion, debate? Put the motion. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Yes, I definitely support these documents going out for consultation, but I have a plea for the public to please read carefully. These documents here are really important. We're going to adopt shortly the consultation document separately to this, which is definitely asking for some feedback on certain topics and giving us a sort of an overall picture of the broader view. But these documents here underpin everything that's going to happen for the next 20 years. It's really important that people have a look at these other documents as well. So we really need to be able to see the detail that's driving the proposed debt levels that are coming up. The financial strategy give some more detail about proposed spending. For example, on page 9 it says of the total growth upgrade program of 552 growth and upgrade program of 552 million, 95 million is assumed to be funded from development contributions. No, we need to be sure that that's enough. The activity statements and the financial statements go into detail about individual project budgets and whether these projects are to renew existing assets, to improve the level of service, that is the quality of our assets, or to cater for growth, extra demand. I note that in the first 10 years, considerable budgets are attributed to improving levels of service. And I'm not convinced that we've got it right. I'm nervous that too much emphasis is being put on improving levels of service. Things like sports grounds upgrades and reserves and parks upgrades are driving a lot of that projected cost. So I need people to look at this in more detail. My gut feeling is that we need to be prioritising water supply and sustainable wastewater and stormwater treatment and disposal options first, and transport solutions so that we can all get around easily. But I may be wrong. We actually need feedback from the public to steer us towards what we're going to keep, what we're going to change before we adopt this plan, this long-term plan, finally at the end of June. If we don't get the steer from you, it makes it a lot more difficult. So what should we be prioritising? What can wait? What are you prepared to pay extra for? Please make the effort to read and understand the documents, attend events to clarify your questions and understanding, talk to staff and councillors so that you can give us informed feedback about what you think and why over the next month. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Jennings.
Can I did have some comments to make on 3.3, but I was under the impression we hadn't passed 3.1, 3.2 yet, but is that, we had? Sorry, Councillor.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's our, yeah. Excellent. All right, just in relation to 3.3, the council Grinch strikes again. Look, I can't support adoption of some of these documents. In particular, the financial strategy, infrastructure strategy, activity statements or financial statements, and revenue and financing policy. Unfortunately, this 5-minute slot is simply not sufficient to articulate all the reasons why, or try to convince any of my colleagues why we're not ready to adopt these. I also didn't want to do a Wellington Council style and bring hundreds of amendments to wade our way through. But look, in any event, I've been pretty open with my elected member colleagues around some of my concerns about the LTP process and the information available to us. And I want to make it clear that my criticism of the process is in no way criticism of key staff, including Ashley and the finance team. You've been incredible, so thank you. The issues principally sit with the governance body and the inputs into the LTP process. And in my opinion, as a group, we have failed in a number of spaces, and we should have insisted on better information, more information, and established far earlier, the program of briefings and workshops that we needed, and really taken those strategy reins. Because we haven't been effective governors, management and staff have naturally filled a void left by us. And I think that's understandable, but it's ultimately governance that should be driving the strategy, and I don't think we've done a great job around that. And I'm taking responsibility for not doing a good enough job myself by voting against the adoption of these documents. It's the only way for me that I can say clearly that I can't accept the process we've gone through and that I don't agree with some of the overarching approach. I'm sorry if that undermines some of the unity that this council has been obviously working towards. But for me, what's proposed in terms of our debt picture, debt capacity, lack of headroom, level of rate increases that are obviously the big issues. And we don't know if the rate rises proposed are actually affordable to our community. And I realise we've signalled further work around that, but I really would have liked some clarity around that in terms of this process before we adopt these documents. And we are talking about increasing the debt ceiling from 195% to 250% of our income, and I'm just not sure that that's the right call right now. I also don't feel any support or ownership of the infrastructure strategy. For me, the options contained within it are framed as pretty stark choices between doing something and not doing something, rather than about, exploring more nuanced or other mid-range options that are informed by discussions around risk, cost analysis, and even basic SWOT exercise. I'm concerned about the capital program and what's in it. Projects in years 1 to 3 of the LTP, as well as out years, and we have very little detail about a number of them, and a number of them aren't supported by business cases or feasibility studies or even a basic cost breakdown. For me, governance hasn't done a good job at putting some rigour around that capital program. I have concerns about the scale of our renewal program and whether our approach is correct in that space. I'm concerned about the splits between growth, level of service increase and renewals across these projects. And there's also projects that we've not had the opportunity to debate before they found their way into the draft LTP, and these and that debate certainly hasn't, or discussion hasn't occurred publicly anyway. I also have no real insight into other than around depreciation and what's driving some of the operational increases. And look, I've heard people today obviously talk about the issues and the suggestion that what's going out now is going to look quite different to come to June. And we've discussed that around the table, and I guess we've agreed a process to deal with some of that, but for me it's a little bit too late in terms of adoption of these documents, because I don't think we should be adopting them if we take issue with them and we actually know they are going to change, and change quite substantially. For me, that's not sound consultation process or practice, and for that reason I just can't back the documents because I don't agree with what's in them. But I will work constructively to obviously try and make something good. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so we've had a mover and a seconder for 3.3 and 3.4. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings, your negative vote is noted. Thank you. Well, against vote, sorry. I shouldn't say that. My apologies. Right. Moving to 3.5, that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the Significance and Engagement Policy 2021. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Deputy Mayor Mason and Councillor Kay Simmons.
Can I just maybe add the words subject to amendment? Agreed amendment with Councillor Ketter.
Councillor Kay Simmons, you happy with that amendment? Thank you. Any discussion or debate on this matter? So moved. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 3.6, that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the draft rates remission policy for public consultation, which will occur concurrently to the long-term plan 2021 to 41 consultation document. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Mitchell, seconded Councillor Brannigan. Any discussion? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. 3.7, that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the draft revenue and financing policy for public consultation as part of the long-term plan 2021 to 41 consultation process. Councillor Bush.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to raise that, given that we've just very recently received the audit opinion, that whereabouts in this process of engaging with our public will the signals raised within that document be noted or given effect to, potentially in some of these policies which are around the revenue and financing, because we have, for as long as I've sat around this table, taken great comfort in unmodified or unqualified audit opinions, and we are not in that position today. And I think we can't proceed without at least signalling or giving effect to. And I know it's late. That's not our fault that it's come at this 11th hour. But we do need to, over the next few months, seriously consider what potential impacts there are. And I know that we will be going through over the next months some further bits of work to fine tune or to rejig a LTP which is going to be maybe more palatable given some of the issues raised, But the question I suppose it could be through to the CE is that when does this information actually infiltrate through to what we're putting out to the public?
I just wondered if we could, so I'm just sort of thinking through, the members of the public won't have seen the qualification that we've actually received, and also the matters of emphasis that the auditor has raised. And I just wondered if it would be worth, before we go too much further, to actually have our auditor speak to those qualifications that have been made first, for then us to get an idea of what is the significance of those, the one qualification and the matter of emphasis that's been covered in Mr. Lucy's report, and then we can have that discussion after that. Is that? I just wondered if that's okay.
Mr. Lucy, would you like to join the table, please? We were going to welcome you a bit later, but
to the opinion? Or?
yes, please, thank you.
So, as the Chief Executive's just outlined from the Council, so our qualifications in regard to one specific matter. So it's in regard to the assumption that has been made in regards to the funding of the Taraika infrastructure. So at the moment, the assumption in the in the supporting information and the consultation document is that the funding of that infrastructure will be externally funded. As is disclosed in the consultation document and the assumptions, there's information there about what the current state is, which is that there are some agreements in place with Crown Infrastructure Partnership, and that there is a agreement that Council needs to put in some funding, but the assumption is that external funding will be obtained, which will mean that Council does not have to bear, for lack of a better word, that debt and to provide that funding. So our qualifications are very much related to that specific issue. So in our view, we've used the word unreasonable. The reason we've said that is because the information that is available to us at the moment is purely the external, the agreements with Crown Infrastructure Partners, and the fact that the Council does have to put in some money of its own or find some other source of it. And at the moment, our discussions with Council management has been that the discussions on that front have not progressed enough that therefore they're able to give us further information, give us certainty that we think that is then a reasonable assumption. So we think the disclosures around that issue are good. So therefore we think that that's an effective means of communicating with your community. But we are of the view that on the basis of the information available at the moment, the assumption should have been that council did actually have to put in the money. In terms of, so that's in regard to the qualification or the modification. We sometimes use the words interchangeably, but in this case we use the word qualified. We've also included 3 emphasis of matter. So they are not diminishing from our opinion, so they don't affect our opinion, but they are extra wording to highlight to a reader of the consultation document that we think these areas are of particular importance for them to understand. So one is around 3 waters, and that is, you won't be surprised to learn that is something that will be in all consultation documents up and down the land, simply because of the uncertainty that's depending on what happens in that space. Then the other 2 are, one is around the level of capital expenditure that the council is undertaking. It's a significant increase. There's other entities that are also undertaking significant levels of increase. We're simply pointing out the risks that are there, which council has included in the consultation document, highlighting what the potential risks are in that space. So that's around, if you aren't able to do that, what the ramifications might be. So we're simply bringing the reader's attention to that. And the reason we're doing that is simply because of the large increase in the capital expenditure program over the period of the LTP. And the other aspect that we brought attention to is in terms of the assets, the 3 waters infrastructure, and that's in relation to, at the moment, the renewals programs largely based on the age of the assets. Council does have a reasonable understanding of the condition of its assets, but in terms of how that then is flowed through into how the renewals expenditure budget has been developed, is going to be as you get closer to the time of having to reach those renewal decisions for those particular aspects, that you'll then be double checking, for lack of a better phrase, my words, what the condition of those assets are, whether they do need to be replaced at that time or not. We're highlighting the risks that you might have to do it earlier than not, and so we're referring to that aspect of the disclosure in the consultation document. So hopefully that explains that aspect. Happy to take questions.
So the audit report is included in the consultation document as well, which, you know, what Mr. Lucy has just espoused in terms of those matters of emphasis and the qualification are included in the consultation document.
So through you, Your Worship, in answer to Councillor Bishop's question, any work that might be, any focus that we might have is on the qualification only. And we will be doing work between now and the time that we actually adopt the LTP to determine if that qualification can be addressed and the concern that has been raised by the auditor. And there's a little bit of work that we need to do in the short term. There's no guarantee that we'll actually have that done by the time that we adopt the LTP, but I can signal that work is underway at the moment and looking at what might be signalled to, at least to the council, that might be put in place going forward as the alternate funding option. Actually, it's not the alternate funding option, it's whether we can actually get that third party funding coming back up.
Yes,
or thank you. Or if neither of those eventuate, what that looks for our ratepayer. And I guess where I was heading was, given the information is now on the table, and we're going to have consultation to try and extract as much value out of the process as possible. I was thinking in my mind, if there was the 2 scenarios, you know, if this $27 million didn't eventuate through that external source, that has a significant effect on our financials. And I think rather than attaching yet another document in amongst what we're going out with, and where you see the graph in a line, that there could be another line added to the graph to say, you know, there is one. I was drawing in pencil. Okay. Okay, I stand to be corrected on that, but look, all I wanted is that it is absolutely clear for those who are engaging with this process that the understanding of what may eventuate is able to be certainly well understood. 41.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you'll see on page 41 the standard line in terms of borrowings. You'll see a blue dotted line, and that effectively we wanted to make sure in terms of conversations with audit that regardless of the fact that we'd made an assumption that if that assumption didn't eventuate, then we wanted to make sure people were clear on what that would do to the borrowing. So it does, as you can see in the picture, it does put us above our 250% borrowings limit, but we are still within the LGFA. But it's definitely a stretch and not something that it would be a real stretch for us. But what we wanted to do is at least make sure that it was clear for the public.
Thank you. Okay, so moving back to 3.7, could I have a mover and a seconder for that resolution, please? Councillor Allen, Councillor Mitchell, any further debate or discussion on that matter? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings is against. So the motion is carried. Thank you. Moving to 3.8, that the Horowhenua District Council resolves that it is financially prudent, after considering the matters set out in section 100 in brackets 2A-D of the Local Government Act, to operate in deficit for the years 2023/24, given that this will be recovered over the first 10 years of the plan. I just wondered whether the Chief Financial Officer might just explain why that resolution is in front of us.
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. So on page 39 of the consultation document, we do try to be really clear when in any given year from an operating perspective we're either in surplus or deficit, and from a local government perspective we do require council to consider that and make a special resolution about that. So that's really to make sure from a governance perspective that you're made aware of that clearly as part of the consultation document setting process. So you can see in the operating surplus deficit graph there's a small red bar for years 23-24. But over the 10-year period we are looking to, as we've discussed, move to increasing the level of funding for renewals that we have through rates. So that will correct itself absolutely through those years, and you can see that in terms of the surpluses that are coming in those future years, which are to increase that level of rates funding of renewals.
I suppose the question then could be asked of audit. You're comfortable with that?
It's for council to decide.
Right back at you, Mr. Mayor. You'll recall the platform that you stood on at the election, and how you were all for balanced budgets, and the question from me to you is, are you happy as the leader of this district, given what you have stood for, that we are going to present a red line?
Thank you for that reminder, Councillor Bush, and you are got a good memory. I did say that one of those issues that I did want to ensure that we did return to surplus, and as you can see over the previous number of years, which you have been party to, there has been deficits for a number of years, and I think in my my estimation and consideration, it is not financially prudent to necessarily target a deficit, and I'm certain that over the next year, while this governance table is still in operation till the end of October 22, we have an opportunity before then to try and change that.
I look forward to your support in that endeavour, Mr. Ned.
Whether I'm here after October 22 is another matter. Any further, Councillor Mitchell?
Just point out that this is for this draft consultation document. It could well change if things change over the next 2 months, couldn't it? And then we'd be having to, again, say that we were comfortable with that situation. Thank you.
So the motion is, I'll put the motion, all those in favour? I thought we'd done that. Have we hadn't? Sorry, my apologies. Could I have a mover and a second for that motion, please? Councillor Brannigan. Seconder. Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings, you're against as noted. And Councillor Bishop. Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, just to note that we've retained the America's Cup.
So I hope you've all got your red socks on and we'll duly celebrate accordingly. That is good news. Okay, moving to page number 27, the adoption of the long-term plan 2021/41 consultation document. Could I move receipt of the report? Councillor Allen, seconded. Councillor Isaacs, all those in favour? Against? Carried. So we have 3.3, that the Horowhenua District Council adopts the long-term plan 2021/41 consultation document for public consultation. And 3.4, that if necessary, the group manager, customer and strategy be authorised to correct any minor errors or omissions in the documents prior to public notification. Any clarification, questions, debate, discussion on that? Being none, could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Allen. Could I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Mason. Any further debate?
Thank you. I like Councillor Mitchell implore the public to get involved in this process over the next short while and try to get an understanding of what the implications of this could be for our district. While I support the document coming out for public consultation, it is a qualified support because there is more work to do. There is more, certainly more work for the council table to, as far as understanding and giving that level of comfort to our district of what we think is for the long term sustainable. And I am not averse to debt, but am nervous that the steps that we are taking in this trajectory are taking us to a place which leaves us very limited wriggle room for decision making that we don't know about right now into the future. And it does concern me a bit because we're only at the foot of the mountain, and I have got some reservations, but I look forward to receiving some input from the community, whether that be through the submission process or the phone calls that invariably come during this period. And I just ask that the public do get involved, and together I think we'll produce a better outcome.
Councillor Isaacs.
Yeah, I'd also like to echo Councillor Bishop's words there, and really try and encourage the public to submit on this and to give us as much feedback as possible on what's been a very complex and time-driven LTP process, which I think the officers and everyone involved has worked very, very hard, but there's still a few balls in the air for me as far as I'm concerned, and over the next coming couple of months we'll hopefully nail that out. But the more input I think that the community and the ratepayer can give to us as councillors and governors, I believe is only going to make it a lot stronger for us to make the right decision going forward. So it's been a very big process for all the staff and also for councillors over the last 3 or 4 months with a lot of time pressure. So I really would like everyone to actually get out of their comfort zone and get involved in this so we've got decent feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Allen.
So look, I join that chorus. 3 people have already brought that message to the table, Councillors Mitchell, Bishop and Isaacs. What that looks like for me is the public telling us what they don't want as well as what they do want. We know all too well that time and again submitters want 2 things. They want everything and they don't want a rates rise. That's what they want. So I really implore, following on from the previous speakers, that the mission is for those people who engage with us, and I hope there's many, for them to clearly enunciate the things that they do not want council to proceed with, and particularly to look at those big ticket items. So that would be my final statement around that.
Thank you. Do you want to speak, Councillor Jennings?
Yep.
You may.
Councillor Grinch, round 3. Look, I've been upfront with my colleagues earlier in this meeting, and I guess prior to today, that I can't support this consultation document going out. And a big part of that is because of the process that has been followed, and I guess a lack of rigour around some key elements making up the documents that sit behind this. I do have concern about a lack of transparency and openness around some of the sessions that we've had to get to where we are. But ultimately, I just don't believe in this plan. I don't really support the proposals around our debt picture, rates, capital program, and a range of other aspects. And I genuinely wanted to be positive and constructive, but I just can't with this plan. And I was really excited about doing this long-term plan process, and I'm really gutted and disappointed and frustrated that I haven't had the experience that I was expecting and wanting. And I guess I reflected on the fact that when people vote for us as elected members, they operate on faith that we will do right by them and that we'll make quality decisions and put forward proposals that are evidence-based and robust. And I just don't think we've done that with what's inside this plan. And I said earlier that this has been, in my opinion, a failure of our collective governance role. And because I don't think this is actually our plan, and it's not a reflection of our vision. And yes, we have expressed a vision around growth, but I don't think any of us around this table are genuinely clear about whether our strategy is just to be ready for that growth or whether we're going to go chase it and actually go and target it. We've never agreed that. We've never had that conversation. And for me, that's really important that we should have done that. And so beyond doing growth stuff in the plan and as is captured in the supporting documents, I don't really know what our clear vision is. what we're for and what we're against. What difference do we want to actually make, and when do we want to make things happen, and why? For me, I think that this plan is a plan of missed opportunities, and we just have to look at what's not in there in terms of the consultation document. There's nothing around housing and combating housing affordability challenges, despite everyone at this table, I think, agreeing that that's one of our top priorities right now. There's nothing around making Horowhenua a better destination to capture that domestic tourism spend. So, look, because I don't believe in the plan sitting, or the document sitting behind this document, I'm not proud of it, and I don't have any energy to sell it. So, therefore, I can't vote in favour of the consultation document summarising it. And look, I apologise to you, Ashley, and the finance team for all of your work in putting this together and not being able to support it. And I wanted to apologise to the public as well, I guess, for my individual failure as a governor not to have done a better job and delivered a better product. And look, I've heard many of my colleagues say that this is just a plan for consultation, or these documents and this consultation is just for consultation, and there is still time to change things, and of course, you know, things will change because of public submission. And that's great, and I understand that, but I've been actually concerned about the attitude that this is just about getting anything out there to tick the consultation box. To me, that's not genuine consultation. And of course, we have to keep an open mind to public feedback, but ultimately we have to be prepared to execute the plan or the proposals that we put out there. You have to be prepared to follow through. And so, hearing the comments from councillors today, that's clearly not the case. And so, my question is, how is the public meaningfully able to provide feedback on our proposals if the message today is that we all know they're going to drastically change come June? In my opinion, that's a poor way of doing consultation, and I really genuinely don't think, if someone, in the remote possibility that someone wanted to, I don't think it would withstand legal challenge. And look, I realise that there's plenty of support around the table today to adopt the consultation document, and so I therefore just finished by saying, like other councillors, I encourage people to write to council and councillors to share their views on their vision and the way forward for Horowhenua.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am going to challenge some of Councillor Jennings' comments. This is my third term, third LTP. This is by far the most complex, far-reaching process that we've been through, that most of us sitting around this table have been through anywhere near, probably in our lifetime. I'm not sure what Councillor Jennings' expectations were when he was elected. They're probably far different than some of us around the table in terms of what he thought the process is, or what the process should be. In parts of that he may well be right, but I live in reality. Reality is there's a huge amount of work going into this LTP by staff and elected members, many briefings, many workshops, many conversations, thousands of emails, hundreds of documents to read, and someone has produced that stuff for us to read. So it's been far-reaching, it's been wide. Has it been perfect? No. We've had conversations about the flaws that we've seen, and and we've all taken some responsibility for that. But at the end of the day, we sit here with a document that must go out to the community as part of the legal process and the requirements of this council. And as governors, if we didn't do that, we would then be failing. That part I would agree with Councillor Jennings, we would then be failing. I don't feel we've failed at all. Has the process been as good as it could have been? No. But these are very different times, and people, us, officers, staff, everyone involved in this process, no doubt. And considering we still have to produce the levels of service and the work day to day that we do, and us as councillors do, still has to go on. And growth has meant a lot of challenges for us. And we spoke about that 5 years ago, when growth was first put on this table by Shaman Cup, about the challenges that we would face, and we're seeing those right now. So I don't agree that with Councillor Jennings, who's probably a new kid on the block to some extent. The comments he's made, I simply don't agree with them. I've made it clear, and publicly I have to say that. Not that I don't agree with some of the things we've all said in that process. So the document has to go out to the community. It is going out to the community. I believe in this process that we will get feedback more, hopefully more. I sit here and see the media around here tonight, which is extremely disappointing. Hopefully our comms can get the message out to the media that the councillors have talked about tonight in terms of public being involved in this process. So it has to go out. It will go out. I believe we have the opportunity to make changes to the document or the LTP as it goes out to the final adoption, and we will do that. And I'm confident we will do that. And I totally support it going out. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I do understand where Councillor Jennings is coming from. This has not been a normal long-term plan, and I think the main reason for that is because it was only in about October that this council adopted a 95th percentile for growth, which is suddenly the population is going to almost double in 20 years, and officers had not anticipated that councillors were going to use that as an assumption for this long-term plan, and they've had to do an enormous amount of work to try and make that a reality. I think to change all the assumptions, and maybe the 95th percentile was too high in hindsight. Maybe that's not the right one. I don't know. But I think that there are reasons why this was an extraordinary long-term plan. Also last year we cut the spending. We had a decrease in the annual plan. So there are things that didn't happen that actually need to be made up for. So there are reasons why this is far more complex and difficult than it normally is. And really from October and then with the Christmas break, and everybody trying to get their head around documents during the Christmas holidays, it's just been a nightmare. And I am really hopeful that we can now use this time up to June to actually tweak things, modify things, and actually come out with what we in the community really want to come out with. It has been hugely pressurised, but I wouldn't want to put it back any further because then it eats up into the next year and so on. And I think we have to do this, but we have to try and get it right by the end of June.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I just quickly add one thing?
Councillor
Because
Casey.
it's been mentioned a few times about community, how important it is for them to feed back. But I think we need to be reminded as elected members, we have a whole lot of dates in front of us where people will be coming and asking questions. So I think it's really important that each and every one of us make a conscious effort to be at more than one of those. Because sometimes in the past we've been very light in those areas, and our officers will need support as well.
Point taken. Thank you. Okay, so the motion has been put. So 3.3 and 3.4. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Jennings. The motion is carried. Thank you. Can I just acknowledge, Stephen, thank you for being here today. Appreciate this has been a pretty challenging process for everybody, and no doubt we will see you again over the next months. Can I also acknowledge, especially Ashley, the amount of work that you have put in over the last few months. It is noted around the table that, and Councillor Jennings has made a note of it as well, but also everybody in the room. Look, it has been a challenging process, and I was taken by Robin Harpy's words at the opening of the River Loop a few weeks ago, that this is not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning. And now we move on to the next stage of that, and we do have probably 2.5 months of some fairly extensive and pretty major work in front meet with open arms and look forward to, and the discussion and the debate that will ensue, as we've heard, will be interesting, to say the least. And as everybody said, it is for the betterment of our community in the end, and I'm sure we will make some good decisions in that space. So thank you all, and I will declare the meeting closed.